Hello, everybody. If you're watching this on record, just hang in there. It's just about 10 o'clock. I like to start at about 10:02. Give some people a few minutes extra to come in. So hope everybody had a grand weekend and you are enjoying the beauty of today. It is wonderful out there. I hear it may rain later today. So get out now while you can, mow your lawn, exercise, ride your bike. You can ride our bikes. Just be busy. Hello, Jackie. Good morning to you. Oh, Charlene, good. Already went for a walk. Fantastic. Okay, everybody able to hear me okay? Just type yes or no. I guess you wouldn't say no if you couldn't hear me. Hi, Marion. Okay, good. All right, starting about 30 seconds or so. Alrighty. Well, we're going to get started. Before we dive back into Jonah, after all, this is Mondays with Jonah. Actually, I'm thinking about it right now. I would love to change the background. I know I'm just kind of in an office right now. One day, if it gets warmer and we're still doing this, I have to do this outside. Wouldn't that be cool? Anyway, alrighty. It would be really neat if we did this by a lake or by a sea. But anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to start by reading something written by a woman named Cameron Trimble. Every now and again, I'll get an email, maybe once or twice a week from her. I forget exactly where she is geographically, but I know she's connected with the UCC, and she has a real good take on what's going on right now in the world. Yesterday, if you were able to make it to our service, I talked about in the sermon, among other things, the disciples on the boat, and the boat was quite obviously on stormy seas, and Jesus said, "Quiet, be still." Now, Jesus was talking to the waves. He may as well have been talking to the disciples too. And it made me think all week while I was preparing for that sermon, well, we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. We're all dealing with this virus and this and that. We are not all in the same boat, okay? I believe that now. The boat I'm in is a little bit different than someone who is currently on welfare or in need of serious medical attention and cannot receive it. That's not my boat, and I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge how blessed that I am and my family is right now. Now, of course, that could change, but my point is, we're not all in the same boat. Are we in the same storm? Now that's different. Let me read this. And again, this is from Cameron Trimble. She says, "These are confusing days. Do we open states? Do we stay home? Will my job be there when this is over? Will my child be going to school in the fall? Will I run out of money this month? Can my family help me if I should need it? What will I do if I get sick and don't have insurance? It's hard to find our bearings," she says. "Life feels adrift. And while we are sharing the experience of disorientation, we are not all experiencing the same vulnerabilities. We are in this together, but our journeys are uniquely our own." I recently read a piece that helped me tap into this sense of isolated connection that I've been experiencing. Perhaps you've seen it too. Now I'm going to read what she posted. It's a You may have seen this on Facebook. I think I might have seen it once. It's called We Are Not in the Same Boat. And it goes like this. I heard that we are all in the same boat, but it's not like that. We are in the same storm, but not in the same boat. Your ship could be shipwrecked, and mine might not be, or vice versa. For some, quarantine is optimal, a moment of reflections or reconnection, easy in flip-flops with a cocktail or coffee. For others, this is a desperate financial and family crisis. For some that live alone, they're facing endless loneliness. While for others, it is peace, rest, and time with their mother, father, sons, and daughters. With the $600 weekly increase in unemployment, some are bringing in more money to their households than when they were working. Others are working more hours for less money due to pay cuts or loss in commission sales. Some families of four just received $3,400 from the stimulus package, while other families of four saw zero. So, some were concerned about getting certain candy for Easter, while others were concerned if there would be enough bread, milk, and eggs for the weekend. Some want to go back to work because they don't qualify for unemployment and are running out of money. Others want to kill those who break quarantine. Some are at home spending 2 to 3 hours a day helping their child with online schooling, while others are doing the same on top of a 10 to 12-hour workday. Some have experienced the near death of the virus. Some have already lost someone from it, and some are not sure if their loved ones are going to make it. Others don't believe this is a big deal. Some have faith in God and expect miracles this year. Others say the worst is yet to come. We are not in the same boat. We are going through a time when our perceptions and needs are completely different. Each of us will emerge in our own way from this storm. It is important to see beyond what is seen at first glance, not just looking, actually seen. We are all on different ships during this storm, experiencing a very different journey. And that's by an unknown author. And then she just ends this little email by saying, I don't know the unique contours of your journey, but I am grateful to ride out the waves together. My comfort comes not in an expectation that God will perform some great miracle, but that God is with us through it all. We can trust this journey because we are known. Those are great words from Cameron Trimble. And now that I'm thinking about it on my feet, I definitely could have used that yesterday in the sermon. One of the points I made, and it really bleeds into today's lesson with Jonah very nicely, is God hears us. We can pray to God all we want. God will hear us. God will listen. We have his attention. But God may not answer your prayer or my prayer the way we want. It's like when your own child, your own son or daughter asks you for something and you hear it, but you say no. And then they'll say, you didn't listen to me. Oh no, I listened to you. You're just not getting what you want. There is a big difference there, of course. God is with us during this storm. And I wish that there were more eloquent things I could say about what's going on now. I do feel, and I don't know about you, but I do feel a certain sense of optimism. I feel like today, what are we, April 27th? We're nearing the end of the month. And I know Governor Pritzker has extended the stay at home for another month. But I feel like, and maybe I'm way off on this, but I feel like the country, the world as a whole, is kind of starting to emerge slowly but surely. And if not physically, then definitely emotionally, definitely mentally, definitely spiritually. And I think that's a good thing. Which brings us to Jonah, because Jonah was in a much different situation than us, but nonetheless, he was on a boat and definitely in a storm. So while yesterday we spoke about the disciples asking Jesus if he cared, because he was sleeping while they were enduring this storm on the Sea of Galilee. It's a little bit different with Jonah. So previously on Monday with Jonah, we talked about, just by way of review, God, he had directed Jonah, his prophet, go to Nineveh, preach to those people, tell them to repent. And Jonah basically said, yeah, I don't think so. I'm going to go the other way. So I'm going to get on the ship. So thanks, God. So we quite clearly see Jonah running away from God in chapter 1. He's going to run towards God in the next chapter, which we will have time to start today. So while he's on this little voyage, he too falls asleep, a deep sleep, it says in verse 5. Not for long, because there's another furious storm going on there. Let me pick up at verse 7, chapter 1, verses 7 through 16. I just want to briefly review that, and then we'll move on to the next chapter. Then the sailors said to each other, come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity. They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, tell us who is responsible for making all this trouble for us. What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? They asked him 5 questions like that. I imagine Jonah's thinking, man, I just woke up. I don't even know what time it is. Anyway, he answered, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. This terrified them, and they asked, what have you done? They knew he was running away from the Lord, because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, what should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us? Pick me up, throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will become calm. I know this is my fault, that this great storm has come upon you. Instead, the men did their best. I'm on verse 13 now. Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, you have done as you pleased. Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. You'd think they'd be maybe a little more celebratory. All right, we're gonna live, thank goodness. No, but they feared the Lord, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. All right, what can we learn from this besides what we talked about last week? It's an incredible, I think we talked about this too. What an ethical dilemma these sailors were in. So if we listen to Jonah, we're going to be guilty of murder. If we don't listen to Jonah, we're probably going to die. And this is a choice they had to make. They made a choice. And because they made that choice, the raging sea all of a sudden grew calm. Imagine what that was like. Imagine how loud that was. I don't know about you. I've never been on a ship or a boat, whatever, where it's going crazy and you feel like you're about to drown or you're about to, I don't know, man overboard or anything like that. I imagine that might be one of the scariest moments of one's life. Imagine how loud that must be. And then the sea grew calm. What a cathartic moment. The ultimate sense of relief and ultimate cause and effect. We throw a guy into the sea calms down. If it were only that easy all the time, right? By not making a choice, I'm talking about Jonah here, because Jonah chose not to decide. By not making a choice, what God did was say, I'm going to make a decision for you. And then he gives the sailors an opportunity to really decide life or death. You don't have to go there. I'll read it. But shortly before Moses dies, and he knows he's going to die, you remember Moses did everything he could to help out his fellow Israelites, but he wasn't perfect and he disobeyed God even a little bit. And God said, well, you're not going over to the promised land. You're not crossing. You can look, but you cannot touch. Anyway, so he knows Joshua is about to succeed him as the leader of Israel. So he is speaking as God's spokesperson shortly before this to a repentant group of Israelites promising restoration. This is regarding choices. This is Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 15 through 20. See, I set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. For I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, and to keep his commands, decrees, and laws. Then you will live and increase, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you are not obedient, if you are drawn away to bow down to other gods and worship them, I declare to you this day that you will certainly be destroyed. You will not live long in the land you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And again, I'm using the NIV for this, which tends to use more masculine pronouns than some of the other translations, such as the NRSV. But the point is there. And eventually Jonah, there's some conviction, at least among the sailors. If you look closely at verse 16, at this, the men greatly feared the Lord. They offered a sacrifice to the Lord. We don't know what it was, but they made vows to him. It's interesting. The pagans, these guys, the non-believers, they turn to God. Jonah does the opposite. He runs away. So what happens next? What happens next? It's incredible. If you've ever watched VeggieTales, you love this part. If you have children, they know this part of the story so well. And they'll tell you that, yeah, he went into the belly of the whale. But guess what? It doesn't say that it's a whale. We just think it is. Ultimately, it really doesn't matter. If you're not careful, you'll miss the very last verse of chapter 1. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish. How many days and nights? 3. 3 days and 3 nights. So let me read Jonah's prayer. Jonah chapter 2 is pretty short. It's only 10 verses. The first 9 verses are his prayer and then his deliverance in verse 10. Let me read that. Let's see. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, in my distress, I called to the Lord. He answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I have been banished from your sight. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. Imagine this. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. I will say, pay attention here, I will say, salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. That's incredible. I'm only going to go on for about another 5 minutes, so we're just not going to be able to flesh all this out. I think we can probably get to it next week. But this is incredible. You got Jonah. Now, what do we notice about this? It's not in present tense, is it? It's mostly written in the past tense. So if you want to be, if you want to look into some form of biblical criticism, which I think is fine, I think it's a healthy thing to do, it's very possible, if not likely, that this little poem was added later. And again, it really doesn't matter because the point does not change. It almost sounds like a psalm, does it not? This is a beautiful psalm. It belongs, like what we have been reading in Psalm 116, perhaps, something like that, or the 88th Psalm. It belongs, it almost could have been written by David. One of the things I noticed from this is, I look in the mirror. This is a Matt, you need to look in the mirror passage, because sometimes I don't pray as much as I should. And not only that, but with as much heart as maybe I should. Sometimes it's kind of perfunctory, like, all right, God, thanks for this food. Hope it nourishes me. Goodbye. I'm not saying every single prayer needs to sound like this. Ultimately, that's between you and God. But I think God does appreciate it when we put some heart into it. And look, I'm guilty as anyone sometimes. But how often do you pray, and where do you pray? And this is obviously, you're not going to be able to answer me. If this was a real class, I'd love to hear your discussion on this. But it's a good rhetorical question. How often and where do you pray? What does that look like? Do you need to be in the belly of a fish? Not literally, of course, figuratively speaking, in order to pray that kind of prayer. Whatever we know, and we only know so much about this, something happened to Jonah in there. There was some sort of turning point, was there not? Something had to happen. He was stuck. Whether you think it was really a fish or just he was stuck, or it's not taken literally, it doesn't really matter. He was stuck somewhere. We're going to say a fish for 3 days and 3 nights, okay? Again, you've not been stuck in a fish for 3 days, but you've been somewhere. You've been, even if you're at home or outside somewhere, you're stuck. We have all been stuck in a rut for at least 3 days and 3 nights, if not longer. It's okay to wrestle with God because, as I've said many times before, if you're wrestling with God, that means what? It means you're in contact with him, with God. So he prays, just Jonah, and then it's like, okay, God hears him and says, I'm going to command the fish to vomit you out. That must have been quite a sight for the people who may or may not have been on the beach then. But there was some release and there was some deliverance after Jonah's suffering. And we'll get more into this next week, but it's really hard to talk about suffering. There are people who get a hangnail and think it's the worst thing in the world. And frankly, they are kind of a pain. That's kind of a different type of suffering than someone who's in the hospital and dealing with this horrible virus and someone's been intubated for 3 months or 3 weeks. And, I'm not saying your suffering is invalid or mine is invalid, but, how do you suffer? And someone asked me this question once. They asked me, I'll never forget, what does it mean to suffer well? And I don't know what that means because it could be different for you than me. Let me give you a quote by someone who recently died from cancer. He said this, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but this is his quote. He said, suffering well means that no matter what is going on, good or bad, God still shines through the circumstances, and others can still God's grace and glory reflected in my situation, still see God's grace and glory reflected in my situation. For good or bad, it would magnify God's greatness. in this situation. I'm just writing a note because we're going to really dive into that a little bit more next Monday. I don't know. It's hard to argue with someone who thinks that way when they're going through cancer. Their feelings are their feelings. And we validate those. We affirm those. One of the themes of essentially everything I preach on now is it's okay to doubt. It's okay to question God when things are not going our way. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's right to preach a gospel or to the health and wealth gospel, to promote the health and wealth gospel. I'll end here. There was a friend of mine from Pennsylvania, a Christian from a different church, and he was riddled with cancer for years. I don't know how he survived as long as he did, but he was an amazing guy. And someone said to him once, if you only had more faith, your cancer would go away. Please tell me you've never said that to someone. Again, not being cured, not having the answers does not equate to lack of faith, just equates to that lack of answers. This is a man who suffered well. He might not have, he didn't survive. At the end, he died. But no, we can be faithful Christians. We can be faithful men and women who aren't Christians, who know how to suffer. And we're all going to do it differently. Do we all need to be Jonah and be thrown into water? No, we don't. But my point is this, and I'll leave you with this one. Affirm someone's feelings, especially now. We're all going through weird situations. Some of us are dealing with physical pain. A lot of us are dealing with emotional, mental, social pain, some identity struggles. Affirm someone. Don't be that person to go on Facebook and tell someone, "Oh, it's okay," or that you're wrong. I don't, just believe and you'll be fine. Affirm people's feelings, even if you just do it today, because that will take you a long way and it'll help them even more. All right, I've gone on long enough. Next Monday we'll pick up at. We'll dig a little bit deeper into what Jonah had to say, and if time, we'll get to the third chapter. I hope everybody has a wonderful Monday, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.